pleasant good evening to everyone. We're indeed glad that you are here with us in this, our second session or part 2 of How Does Your Garden Grow? And if it's your first time joining us, we are delighted to have you. If you're returning, we are still especially glad to have you. I am Judy Bellamy, and on behalf of the ladies at the Church of God at Silver Sands, a hearty and a warm welcome to one and all. At the end of our last session, we would have shared a quote by Alfred Austin, where it says, in part, to nurture a garden is to feed not just the body, but the soul. And there's some special words. Not only is gardening good for the soul, but Proverbs 16:24 says, pleasant words are as an honeycomb, sweet to the soul and health to the bones. So this evening, before we get into our session, we want to share some special words which God has given us in his word. And those words are found in Isaiah 41:10. And I hope that they encourage you, because especially in these COVID times, in this uncertain times that we live in, we need to know that, have that comfort from God, and his word is sure and never lies. So Isaiah 41 tells us, 41 verse 10, fear thou not, for I am with thee. Be not dismayed, for I am thy God. I will strengthen thee, yea, I will help thee. I will uphold thee with the right hand of my righteousness. So I'm encouraging you this evening to take heart in those words, because God has promised that he will never leave us. He will always help us. Let's bow our heads. Heavenly Father, we give you thanks for life, health, and strength. We want to thank you for this evening session where we can come together to learn more. I pray, Father, that you would bless the facilitators as they should impart their knowledge, and give us open minds, dear Father, that as we receive, dear God, what they would impart onto us, that we wouldn't be selfish with what we learn, dear Father, but we would also help others. We would be your hand extended to the world. I pray that you guide us, direct us through this session, and we give you thanks for doing it. Amen. So through this series, we hope to expand our knowledge and our skills in the area of home gardening. And our facilitators, our presenters this evening are Stacey, Blunte, and Alvin, Romeo. For those of you who were here last time, you would be familiar with those faces. And just to give you a brief introduction for those who were not here, Stacey, she's a teacher at she's a senior teacher at one of our secondary schools, where she teaches agricultural science. And I must say that agriculture is her passion. She is a wife and a mother of 3 lovely daughters. And I'm sure with her experience and the passion that she has, which we see in the delivery, that we will gain a lot more information this evening that we can grow. And Alvin Romeo, he is an extension officer with the Ministry of Health here in Barbados, and his main responsibility is assisting crop and livestock farmers in solving most of the issues that they would have within agriculture. So we welcome them again this evening. And before they start, I want to remind you that they will present, and at the end of their presentation, we'll have time for question and answer. So as we go along and you have any questions, you can put them in the chat and they will be answered at the end. Also, we invite you to share if you've been with us before, if you benefited or listened to our first session and there were any things that you would have benefited from. We want to know that you're growing with us. So share your experience in the chat so that, let us know that we are doing something good and we will come again, right? So over to Stacey and Alvin.
Thank you, Judy. A pleasant and wonderful evening to all of you joining us today, and a warm welcome to my co-host, Alvin Romeo. As Judy would have said, to those of you who are with us for the first time, and to our returning guests, both from our beautiful island of Barbados and abroad, thank you for making the effort and making the decision to spend part of your evening with us. We want to hear from you this evening. Our returning guests, as Judy said earlier, can share with us any tips that we shared in our last session that you have tried, and we want to hear from you as it relates to our presentation this afternoon. So as she said, please feel free to put those questions in our chat. Today, our presentation is going to be on fertilizers. Audience, we have heard you, we have listened to you, and we know many of you are struggling with fertilizing your plants. So we are looking today at fertigation. This is what how to fertilize your plants, sorry. So this evening's focus will be on fertilizers. I encourage you to stay with us as we share the when, the what, and the how to fertilize your plants. So let's begin. So as I said earlier, we are going to be looking at fertilizer facts, what, when, and how often to fertilize your plants. Now, a fertilizer is any material or natural or synthetic origin that is applied to the soil to supply one or more plant nutrients. They could be micronutrients or macronutrients. And these nutrients are actually essential to the growth of plants. Fertilizers are actually needed because they replace those nutrients in the soil taken either by the plant because they need them to grow or by the rain when it falls. They may be replaced. The fertilizer may actually replace one or more of those nutrients. Nutrients may either be of an organic origin or they may be of an inorganic origin. And these are used to increase the yield or the amount of crops that you're going to be getting. Now, this afternoon, we're going to be looking at different types of fertilizers, as I said earlier, the why, the how, and the when. And therefore, we are going to start by looking at organic fertilizers. An organic fertilizer is usually derived from plant and or animal matter, vegetable matter, human excreta, even animal excreta. And it includes things like seaweed, compost, urea, and even sludge. For those of you that are not aware of what sludge is that semi-solid material produced as a byproduct from a sewage plant, from sewage treatment plants. Now, there are several types of fertilizers. Fertilizers can either be complete, incomplete, organic, inorganic, soluble, or insoluble. And we're going to be looking at each of these this evening. A complete fertilizer generally has 3 primary nutrients, and those nutrients are nitrogen, phosphorus, as well as potassium. As it relates to the incomplete fertilizer, an incomplete fertilizer does not carry all 3 of those nutrients. It may have either one of the nutrients or 2 of the nutrients, but it will not carry all 3 of those nutrients. Again, a complete fertilizer has all 3 primary nutrients, nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, while the incomplete fertilizer does not carry all 3. It may have 1 or 2, but never 3. Soluble fertilizers, those are the ones that when you purchase, they must be diluted with water before they're used. Now, it's very important here that you remember those dilution rates, as you don't want to put too much fertilizer to your plants. Generally, soluble fertilizers must be applied once every week or every 2 weeks. And it also depends on the type of soluble fertilizer that you purchase. Now, those nutrients from the soluble fertilizer are usually very quickly absorbed, and you can generally see the results in your plants pretty quickly. Some examples are liquid soluble powder or even the liquid concentrate. As it relates to the insoluble fertilizers, these ones take a little bit more time to be picked up by the plant because the nutrients are released a lot more slowly. They last in the soils anywhere between 1 to 9 months, and they must be worked into the soil or sprinkle. You can also sprinkle them around, and then they take a while, as I said, to dissolve before the plants can actually have access to those nutrients. So with the soluble fertilizer, you will see almost immediate results, while the insoluble fertilizer, you will not see those results as immediate. Now you may ask, why would I want to use an organic fertilizer? Organic fertilizers generally have a slow release of nutrients, and they're not easily washed away from your soils when compared to the inorganic fertilizer. They improve the soil texture as well. So if you're adding things like manure or compost to your soils as fertilizer, you're going to have your soil texture being significantly improved. And you will also find that your water holding capacity of the soil will actually be improved. Organic fertilizers also increase the presence of bacterial and fungal activity in the soil, and they're generally safe for use in the environment. Now, there are disadvantages, obviously, to using organic fertilizers, and this include the fact that they're difficult to obtain. They're also fairly expensive because they're coming from plants, they're coming from animals, and sometimes you may even have to pay, let's say, transportation costs to even collect some of these if you're going to, let's say, to a farm to collect them. So they can be expensive when compared pound for pound with the inorganic fertilizer. They're also not very sterile because obviously they're coming from the bodies, some of them are coming from the bodies of humans or animals, so they're not very sterile. And we also find that the nutrient content is not extremely high. They're less concentrated. So when compared to an inorganic fertilizer, you will find that the organic fertilizer will not be as concentrated as the inorganic fertilizer. And then you will see that the results for the plants are very much inconsistent. So with the organic fertilizer, sometimes you find that the results that you're seeing in your plants are not as consistent as they ought to be. Organic fertilizers, because of their origin or their source, they may also attract vermin. So you may find pests and rodents and such like being attracted to your soils and to your planting area because of the type of organic fertilizers that you may be using. As it relates to inorganic fertilizers are those that are generally referred to as synthetic. They're usually made in a factory. They're usually industrially or manufactured artificially. Simply put, they're man-made, and they contain minerals and synthetic chemicals. There are some advantages, though, for use in organic fertilizers. These include that they're obviously easier to obtain because you can pick them up from any hardware store. They are of a lower cost. They're not as expensive when you look at the pound for pound as compared to the organic fertilizers. They're very high in nutrients, and you will actually find that they dissolve pretty quickly, and therefore they're fast acting, and you will find that you can see almost immediate results in your plants. The disadvantages as it relates to the inorganic fertilizers, because they don't contain any organic material, so they really don't add or improve the soil except like the inorganic fertilizer would. They may contain certain compounds and salts which the plant is unable to pick up, and you will also find that there will be possible chemical buildup in the growing media. So for example, you will find that some of these fertilizers will remain in the soil for a very long time. They also lower the pH of the soil. Now, for those of you that are not familiar with the term pH, pH relates to how acidic or how alkaline a soil or substance might be. And because some of these inorganic fertilizers have a very low pH, the lower the pH value, the more acidic the substance is. So some inorganic fertilizers tend to have a very low pH, and because of that, they tend to make the soil particularly acidic. And then you will find that some of your plants may actually start to burn. You may see evidence of burning in your plants. And you may find that there are some plants that you cannot plant in an acidic soil. Inorganic fertilizers also wash away pretty easily from the soil due to rainfall and irrigation. So unlike organic fertilizers, you will find that the inorganic ones tend to wash away pretty easily from the soil. Organisms that thrive on nitrogen and that thrive on nitrogen and other nutrients, you are going to find that they will grow very quickly when they pick up these inorganic fertilizers. Let me say that again, organisms that thrive on nitrogen. There are some organisms that you're going to find in the environment, those that like or those that thrive on nitrogen, you will find that they will thrive very easily, or they will thrive very well in an environment that has lots of inorganic fertilizers. Those plants and microorganisms that then will need oxygen in water, you are going to find that because of the high presence now of those organisms that need nitrogen, you will find that they will take up a lot of the available oxygen, and the species now that need oxygen and that will be beneficial to your soil, you will also find that they start to die off pretty easily. And this is one of the major disadvantages to using inorganic fertilizers. We simply say that organic fertilizers feed the soil, while the synthetic ones or the inorganic one feeds the plant. The synthetic ones, these are picked up readily by the plant, and therefore this is why we say that they feed the plant. However, the organic ones like manure and such like, they remain in the soil, they improve the quality of the soil as well, and this is why we say that the organic fertilizers feed the soil. Now, when you're going to any hardware store to purchase your fertilizers, one of the first things that should stand out to you is there will be 3 numbers on that package. And many persons tend not to know what those 3 numbers represent. So I'll share with you this afternoon that those 3 numbers they generally represent the percentage of nitrogen, potassium, and phosphorus that may be found in the soil. That again, they represent the percentage of nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium in that order. So if you see, as in the example that is being shown to you, if you see 20, 20, 15, the first 20 represents the amount of nitrogen, the second 20 represents the amount of phosphorus, and the third number, which is 15, that represents the potassium percentage that will be in that package of fertilizer. Now, the percentage is usually compared or relative to the weight of the entire package. So 20% of the weight will be nitrogen, 20% of that weight will be phosphorus, and 15% of the weight of that package will be attributed to the potassium that is found in the fertilizer. The other percentage then, in this example, this makes up 55%. So the 45% that is left is usually what we call filler and other substances that they will put in that fertilizer packaging. So just to reinforce what we just discussed, the numbers on the fertilizer packages generally represent the nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. And these are the 3 main macronutrients that are found in any fertilizer package. So let's take a look now at the classification of fertilizers. There are 3 main types of fertilizers. So when you go to your hardware store, it is very important that you understand or that you know or are aware of which type of fertilizer you need. The 3 types of fertilizers are straight fertilizers, there are complex fertilizers, and then you have mixed fertilizers. Straight fertilizers are those fertilizers that only supply one of those primary nutrients that I would have just mentioned to you to the soil. So for example, they supply either nitrogen, they supply phosphorus, or they will supply potassium for the plant to pick up from the soil. Examples of a straight fertilizer includes sulfate of ammonia. Sulfate of ammonia is considered a straight fertilizer because it supplies nitrogen. So those plants, like those leafy crops, like lettuce and cabbage and kale that may need nitrogen, you can safely apply your sulfate of ammonia. And I must say here that leafy crops generally need a lot of nitrogen. So if you're going to be planting your leafy crops, it is very important that you have some sulfate of ammonia or a nitrogen based fertilizer on hand. Triple superphosphate is also a very good straight fertilizer. This is used to supply if your plants need phosphorus. If you see any indication that your plants may be lacking phosphorus, this is a very good fertilizer that you can use. And then potash. Potash usually supplies either nitrogen or potassium, but it's very good in terms of supplying potassium to your plants. Complex fertilizers, on the other hand, they contain two or three of those primary nutrients, and usually two of those nutrients are chemically combined. They are usually produced in granular form, and examples of complex fertilizers include nitrophosphate, diammonium phosphate, or ammonia phosphate, and I hope that you're taking note here. Nitrophosphate, diammonium phosphate, or ammonium phosphate, and it is important for you to really know what your plants need before you purchase any of these fertilizers. A mixed fertilizer, on the other hand, mixed fertilizers generally contain two or more of the elements nitrogen, phosphorus, or potassium. And these mixed fertilizers are usually obtained either by mixing the ingredients manually or mechanically. Sometimes what some persons may do, depending on what their plants may need, they may buy two straight fertilizers sometimes, and they may mix them to get that mixed fertilizer. But generally, the mixed fertilizer will contain two or more of the elements nitrogen, phosphorus, and or potassium. Fertilizers can also be classified based on whether they're solid or whether they're liquid. Solid fertilizers are usually cheaper to purchase. They're also very easy to store, and they have slow release options. On the other hand, liquid fertilizers tend to penetrate the soil immediately, and you will find results are seen almost immediately in the plant. So let's look at that again. The solid fertilizers are cheaper to purchase, they're easier to store, and they have slow release options. But if your plants are requiring a fertilizer or requiring immediate results, and you know what macronutrient they may be lacking, whether it's lacking nitrogen, potassium, or phosphorus, you may use a liquid fertilizer. Now, I'm going to show you here at this point how fertilizers were, and it's basically a recap of all that I have shared with you this evening.
Hi everyone, welcome to our channel. In this video we are going to show you how to figure out the nutrient concentration in a bag of fertilizer. At the end of this video you will know what the numbers on the front of a bag mean and how they will influence plant growth. Stick around until the end of the video for your own ebook detailing this information. Let's get started. Firstly, we are going to discuss what the most important nutrients are and why they are important for plants. Nutrients are classified as either macro or micronutrients. Plants require higher quantities of macronutrients and lower amounts of micronutrients. Examples of macronutrients include nitrogen, which is important for amino acid and protein synthesis, phosphorus, which helps form cell membranes, and potassium, which is important for carbohydrate synthesis and helps plants fight infections. Other important macronutrients include calcium, magnesium, and sulfur. Iron, manganese, copper, zinc, boron, molybdenum, and chlorine are examples of micronutrients. Based on the nutrients they contain, fertilizers can be classified as either straight or mixed. Straight fertilizers will contain only one nutrient, such as urea, which provides the plants with nitrogen only. Complete fertilizers contain all the three major nutrients: nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. Complete fertilizers are commonly available in dry formulations in bags like this. However, there are so many different mixtures and concentrations. How do you know which fertilizer is best for you? First, you need to know what the three large numbers on the front of the bag mean. These numbers describe the ratio of the nutrients present in the mixture. The first number refers to the nitrogen concentration, the second to phosphorus, and the third to potassium. The number in brackets describes the total amount of nutrients present in the bag as a percentage. For example, if the number in brackets is 18, then in 1 kilogram of that fertilizer there is 180 grams of nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium combined. The remaining weight is made up of other constituents, like lime. So, once you know how to interpret the ratios of fertilizers, you need to know which option will suit you best. As we mentioned before, the elements will influence a plant's growth in different ways. Nitrogen and stimulates vegetative growth in a plant, and applications thereof will promote leaf development. Therefore, fertilizers that have a higher proportion of nitrogen will be suitable if you want to encourage overall growth in your plants. Nitrogen applications have a greening effect because nitrogen is an important constituent of chlorophyll, which makes plants green. Nitrogen deficiencies therefore commonly show as yellow leaves. Phosphorus is especially important for root development in plants. Fertilizers with a higher phosphorus concentration are best when you want to encourage root development. These are perfect when laying new lawns so the grass can establish a healthy root system. Phosphorus deficiencies can present as dark green leaves and purplish stems. The pH of a soil will influence the amount of phosphorus available to plants, so it is important to test your soil if you notice any phosphorus deficiency symptoms. Potassium promotes flower development and encourages overall health in plants. These fertilizers can be applied to flowering plants for high quality, vigorous blooming, and can even infer a degree of disease resistance in the plants. Malformed or absent flowers or fruit can be a symptom of potassium deficiencies. Fertilizer bags will commonly give the exact amount of nutrients in the mixture. However, you may still need to calculate this yourself if they do not provide this information. So how do you do that? Firstly, add up the three numbers on the front of the bag. This will give you the total amount of nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium present. Secondly, for each element divide its number by the total of the three numbers. Lastly, multiply this number by the percentage in the brackets. You will then be left with the percentage of that element in the entire bag of fertilizer. And that brings us to the end of our brief overview of the importance of fertilizers and how you can use that knowledge to pick the best option for you and your plants. Remember to check out the link below for your own copy of our ebook.
Okay, so that was a brief recap of what we were speaking about earlier. So I'm going to now turn over to Alvin, and he's going to take us through the next segment for this evening. Over to you, Alvin.
I thank you very much, Stacey. And let me say welcome to every person who's joined in our session this evening. For those who are joining for the first time, a special welcome to you. And also those that are returning, we're glad that you're back here with us. I'm going to continue the presentation of fertilizing. I'm going to mainly look at the macronutrients, and so that you'll be able to identify when your plant is lacking those three important macronutrients. So Stacey's going to start this slide for me. And after that, we're also going to look at how to fertilize your tree, the different ways or methods of fertilizing your tree, so that you'll be able to apply the fertilizer in the correct manner.
Okay, just 1 minute, Alvin. Let me continue to share my screen. I might experience just a bit of technical issues, so
No problem.
Start it in a minute.
Yeah. After I share my presentation, then we open for questions and question and answers. So you can always jot down your questions so that we'll try our best to answer all questions.
All right.
Okay. Hope everyone is able to see the screen.
All right, just 1 minute.
Sure.
So, over to you.
Yes, thank you very much. So the big question is, does my plant need any fertilizer? And how do you know that your plant needs fertilizer? It's hard to tell by just looking at the soil. So it's better to examine the plant, okay? And there's some common symptoms that we will look for. And the first thing is that the plant has little or no growth. So if you see your plant is not growing, that is one indication that it needs fertilizer or is growing very slowly. The second thing is dead tissues at the leaf tips or the top of the leaf and at the edge of the leaf. When you see your leaf actually turning what we consider brown at the top or the edge, that is an indication that you also need fertilizer. Yellowing or dead leaves on one part of the plant. This may be at the top of the plant or it may be at the bottom. we have some pictures that we will definitely show you. And then overall, the leaf yellowing or yellowing streaks are white between the leaf veins. So once you see a discoloration of the leaf, that is one of the indications that your plant needs some kind of fertilizer. So the first one we're going to look at is nitrogen, which is N, as what we said in the first slide, N, nitrogen. Now, when your plant is deficient of nitrogen, you get what we call slow growth, right? The growth slows dramatically. Instead of pushing out new shoots, there are actually no shoots, and you're watering the plant every day and there's no kind of growth. So that means you're lacking nitrogen. The second thing that you can look at is that the older leaves, which is at the bottom of the plant, starts to become dark or even yellowish, a dark green or a yellow color. I may see a yellow color first, not the leaves at the top, the leaves at the bottom, because nitrogen comes from the soil and it comes up and it's really stored in the bottom first. So once those leaves are turning yellow, that's an indication that your plant needs nitrogen. Then the last one, which is very important, nitrogen transfers from the older leaves, as I said before, into the new leaves. So when you see the new leaves turn yellow, that means the bottom leaves have already turned yellow already. Okay, so look for the bottom leaves first, and then you will see gradually all the leaves will start to turn yellow. The next slide will help you explain a lot more. And the main purpose of nitrogen for your plant, it gives a plant that rich green color. So you know the importance of photosynthesis and everything like that. So when there's no nitrogen or lower nitrogen, the plant becomes pale and then it turns yellow. So therefore, your fruiting ability of the plant will decrease. So the plant will not be able to produce those fruits and blossoms that it needs. Okay, because the plant is not growing and therefore the nitrogen is lacking from the plant or from the soil. Next slide, please. Here is a very good picture of what we call the yellowing of the leaves, a lack of nitrogen. And you will mainly see this at the bottom or the leaves closer to the soil. When the leaves closer to the soil turns yellow, this is what I consider the first stage. When it's yellow, you can look at the stems and see the stems are still green, but actually the leaf formation is starting to turn yellow. The next slide, and look at it, all the bottom leaves in this picture actually turns yellow first, and then the leaves closer to the top, gradually it will go up from there. So once your plant is having any symptoms or signs similar to this, your field or your soil is lacking nitrogen. Phosphorus. Now phosphorus is dramatically slow. The growth is very slow when there's no phosphorus around. The leaves, this time they turn a blue-green, or some people may call it purple. So the leaves literally turn purple when the soil is lacking phosphorus. And then what we call is also stunted growth. So remember, in nitrogen, you can get slow growth. Also for phosphorus is slow growth or stunting growth, but the color of the leaves will be changed to purple, or we call it bluish green, instead of yellow. So I often say to people, the plant will tell you when it's lacking certain nutrients. And certainly we have to learn when the plant is talking to us. Now, what's the purpose of phosphorus? Now, it focuses on energy and strong root development. So early in the life of the plant, when you want that roots to be developed properly so that they can absorb the nutrients from the soil, you need phosphorus in your soil. So when there's a lack of phosphorus, the roots don't develop properly. But then we have the root crops. The root crops also, like the yams and the cassava, when there's no phosphorus, the root crops won't develop neither. Here's a good picture. This is a cotton where you see the purple, a bluish color on the edge of the leaf. So once you see that's coming on your edge, your soil is lacking the phosphorus there. Next slide. And this is corn or maize. And you can see at the top is a normal leaf, or what we call a good leaf. And below is a leaf that demonstrates that there's a lack of phosphorus in the soil. You see the leaf is actually turning purple. So once you see that's happening in your ground, maybe in your yard or whatever the case may be, your soil is lacking phosphorus. The third one, which is very important, is the potassium. Now, the leaves turn yellow from the edge in the direction of the veins, which is slightly different. and they also have a rusty color or spots appear on the leaf. So if you see your leaves turning yellow, but not at the edge, but closer from the edge to the vein, more in the vein area, right? That is when you're lacking potassium. The tip of the leaf will also curl. So the leaves will actually curl. And this is a very good picture. They go back to the picture. So you're actually seeing those rust spots on the leaf. And then if you look in the vein, you're seeing some yellow spots as well. And the leaf is not of the correct shape, it's curled or twisted. So once you see that is happening to your plant, you know then that you are lacking potassium. Now, what potassium is good for? Potassium improves the resistance of your plants to pests and disease. It's like having a booster shot. So potassium gives your plants that boost to be resistant against diseases or viruses that may come around. Also, potassium helps in flowering and fruit set of your plant for those plants that do set fruits. So some people may say, well, I'm having fruits and, I'm having blossoms and the blossoms are dropping off and there's no fruit. So when you see those signs, also you check the leaf, you will realize that your potassium is lacking in the soil. So it's very, very important. So the potassium deficiencies and also the leaves keep curling and ultimately they fall off. Once you see that deficiency in potassium, your leaf will actually fall off. So you're looking for that color, that rusty spot, or even the yellowing, and the leaves actually torting. Those are signs of a lack of potassium. Next slide. Now also we included a slide where you may have to fertilize your trees. And many people have trees, it could be mango trees, pear trees, or even a citrus tree, lime or lemon. And some people go years without fertilizing your tree. So it's important that you fertilize your tree if you want to increase production, having more fruits, and if you want your tree to look lovely. Now, there's a very important thing about fertilizing your tree, and it is what we say, you fertilize your tree around the canopy. It's a big word, a canopy. All it really means is where the edge of the leaves end. That is where you place your fertilizer when you're fertilizing your tree. So you're not fertilizing your tree at the trunk or the base. You're fertilizing the tree at just where the leaves end. And sometimes some people may go 1 or 2 inches in. Why at that point? Because when the rain falls, that is where the roots will be in that area to gather the water. So the roots know that the water comes at that area, raise the canopy, and it's there you will place your fertilizer. And in fertilizing trees, the same thing. What we do for down plants, you get a fork or a stick. If your soil is soft enough, and you just dig a slight hole around that area, that canopy, and you place your fertilizer in the hole. You cover your fertilizer because you don't want the sun to actually burn the fertilizer. You cover your fertilizer, and then you also water your fertilizer down, right? So you cover the fertilizer, and then you water your fertilizer down. Now, how much fertilizer, you may ask, should I put to a tree? Now, there's a common rule. The slide will come up shortly. The common rule for every year your tree is, if your tree is 2 years old, you put 1 pound of fertilizer for every year or every age of the tree year. So if your tree is 3 years old, that tree should be taking 3 pounds of fertilizer. If your tree is 2 years old, it should be taking 2 pounds of fertilizer. And if you have a big tree that is 10 years old, should be in full production, that tree should be using 10 pounds of fertilizer. So I'm just going to repeat that again. For every age of the tree, year of the tree, you add 1 pound of fertilizer to that age. So if it's 5 years, it's 5 pounds. But I will recommend that you give it in two sections, probably 6 months apart. Or if it is a tree, the larger trees, I will recommend one in the rainy season, at the beginning of the rainy season, and then you could give that other fertilizer at the end of the rainy season, which normally is 6 months apart. Next slide. Okay, good. So when you're fertilizing your young crops or your smaller crops, these 2 ways we will recommend that you could fertilize your crops. and one is called a band fertilizer, and it's similar to the trees where you put your fertilizer in a circle, right, or circly around the plant. Again, you with a stick, you just trench a small hole, you place your fertilizer in that hole, and then you cover it. Or you could do what we call the linear one, where you have your plants sometimes with the chive or even the tomatoes, and you could put one line down the row or down the bed, and that you could that fertilizer will go on both parts of the plant. So you don't have to do it circularly around each crop, but you could put it straight in a line. The same method, you draw a small hole, you put the fertilizer in the hole, and then you cover your fertilizer. Now, some people may ask me, well, how much fertilizer should I give a plant? The general rule is for small crops like a tomato tree or lettuce or sweet peppers, you can start with 5 grams of fertilizer per plant. That is 5 grams of fertilizer per plant. If you're accustomed using a teaspoon, it'd be 1 teaspoon of fertilizer per plant. The bigger the plant gets, you could gradually increase to a maximum of 50 grams per plant. Next slide. The other method is what we call broadcast. It's applied by hand or machine, and this is distributed uniformly over a surface of area. Now, for the broadcast method of applying the fertilizer, we will normally use this for lawns or grasses because you just spread the fertilizer across like that. Normally the urea, which is high in nitrogen, right? Why we don't recommend this for crops, because if the fertilizer touch the leaf of the crop, it can burn the crop or they'll burn the leaf. So the broadcast fertilizer is normally for lawns. You could just spread it across, right? But you don't want to do broadcast for your crops because you have to be very careful that the fertilizer don't touch the leaf of the crop. And if it do that, it could actually burn and leave a hole in the fertilizer. Remember, this is a chemical fertilizer that we're talking about. Okay, next slide. Okay, so we're going to do a short review of fertilizers, and then we're going to be ready for a questions and answer session.
You know, with all the talk about fertilizer, how do you know the best fertilizer choice to use for whatever you're growing in your garden or landscape, especially with all the options out there? And what do the numbers on the fertilizer package mean? Well, today we're breaking it down to the fertilizer basics so you can learn the what, when, and how to use any type of fertilizer with confidence. Fertilizer provides nutrients that are key for optimal plant health, and the primary nutrients are nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. Now, those ingredients are represented on the fertilizer package by 3 numbers that are prominently displayed. Now, before we talk about the numbers and what they mean, let's address the primary nutrients and what each one's best known for. And a simple way to remember it, and in this order, is up, down, and all around. The first ingredient in the ratio is nitrogen. Nitrogen helps with plant growth above ground. Nitrogen does a great job of promoting the green leafy growth of foliage, and it provides the necessary ingredients to produce lush green lawns. Lawn fertilizers will frequently have a high first number, a high level of nitrogen. The next nutrient is phosphorus. It's very effective at establishing growth below ground in the form of healthy root systems. It's also the component most responsible for flower blooms and fruit production. You'll notice that fertilizers designed for flower production, or starter type fertilizers for your lawn, have a high middle number, representing phosphorus. The third ingredient is potassium. It's considered important for overall plant health. This is primarily due to its ability to help build strong cells within plant tissue. In turn, the plants withstand various stresses such as heat, cold, pest, and diseases. For example, winterizer fertilizers will have a high third number, a high component of potassium. So about the numbers on the fertilizer package and what they mean. The number always represents the percentage of that primary nutrient relative to the total weight of the package. So for example, a common all-purpose fertilizer is 10-10-10, and that means that 10% of each of those nutrients is how much of that nutrient is in the bag. So Let's take a 50-pound bag, for example. 10% of 50 pounds is 5 pounds. So in a 10-10-10 ratio, you have 5 pounds of nitrogen, 5 pounds of phosphorus, and 5 pounds of potassium. And it's always in that order: nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. So in this case, we have 30% of the total volume of nutrients. So what happens to the other 70%? Well, that's what's considered filler or inert material, which is just really there to help bulk out the packaging and make distribution of the nutrients easier. So now that you understand the basics of the numbers and what each primary nutrient is mostly responsible for, what's the difference between organic and synthetic or man-made fertilizers? Well, first things first, plants can't distinguish between organic and man-made nutrients. The chemical makeup of each nutrient is the same no matter where it originates from. However, man-made synthetic fertilizers are typically engineered to be water-soluble. That means they become available to plants quickly when in contact with water. So the upside is that if you need to get nutrients into a plant quickly, water-soluble synthetic fertilizers do that best. The downside is too much of a good thing is definitely not a good thing. Excessive fertilizer to the plant too quickly can either burn or harm or kill your plants. So think of it as a potentially deadly nutrient overdose. It's really easy to apply too much synthetic fertilizer. And the other risk is that nutrients that aren't taken up by the plant can leach into aquifers and run off into watersheds, contributing to adverse environmental impact. Organic nutrients, on the other hand, need to be broken down in the soil first by the microorganisms that live there. And the breakdown process can take anywhere from a couple weeks to several months, so they become a form that's soluble that the plant roots can absorb. But along the way, those nutrients are becoming part of the soil ecosystem. Now, the really good news is those organic nutrients are never in a concentration that's high enough to harm or burn your plants, and that's a good thing. Now, the downside is that because it takes a little while for those nutrients to break down, they're not readily available, so it requires a little bit of patience. But in my book, organic nutrients are the best way to fertilize your soil because you're feeding the soil while the soil feeds the plants. Some of the more common organic nutrients for nitrogen include blood meal, cottonseed meal, fish emulsion, and seaweed or kelp. For phosphorus, look for bone meal and rock phosphate. And for potassium, green sand and sulfate of potash are good choices. So what am I using here at the garden farm? Well, if you know me at all, you know that I love to feed the soil so the soil can feed the plants. So I'm using organic nutrients. And yes, I recognize that it can take a little bit longer for those nutrients to become available. But I've been feeding the soil constantly, so I always have nutrients in the soil. And I also like knowing that what's in there isn't doing any harm to the soil ecosystem or the plants growing in it. So for me, my choice is to feed the soil so the soil can feed the plants with organic nutrients.
Okay, hope you've enjoyed the video presentation. So at this time, we'll be opening for questions. I think Judy will lead us through that section.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much, Stacey and Alvin. And it seems as though you did such a great job. We only have 2 questions, and I think I can merge them into one. Jennifer wants some guidance on fertilizing seedlings. And Enith is asking, is it best to plant seedlings in soil mix? So I think maybe 2 of those can be answered in one. So is it best to plant seedlings in soil mix? And give us some guidance on fertilizing seedlings.
Okay, let me answer the soil mix first. When you're planting seedlings, I would prefer use sometimes potting mix or peat moss to plant your seedlings in. And not just soil mix. Peat moss allows the seedlings to hold the moisture even better. So you can mix your peat moss with your potting mix to use for seedling production. And in terms of fertilizing your seedlings, you normally use what we consider a foliar feed, which is normally a 20-20-20, which is a spray-on fertilizer. So you just spray it on the crop. Or some people use just Merca-Grow, which is also a spray-on as well. So you can use any of those fertilizers at 20-20-20 or Merca-Grow to fertilize your seedlings.
Okay, so can I ask a further question in fertilizing the seedlings? At what stage, how early can we apply fertilizer to seedlings?
approximately, remember last week we talked about the true leaf, right?
Yeah.
So when you see about 3 or 4 true leaves, you can apply the seedling. That will be about, I would say, 10 to 12 days, almost 2 weeks after you've planted your seedlings. You can start fertilizing. Also, in your mixture, you could also put in a root hormone to enhance the root development. So you could put that in your mixture before you plant, so that your root development will develop even much better.
Okay. All right. I had a question. I'm not sure if I missed it when you were going through. We're talking about, well, the plants speak to us. They tell us more or less when we look at them, we can tell what is needed, what is missing, what they're deficient in. So they've also mentioned about testing the soil. How is the soil tested?
Well, when you test the soil, I'm thinking they're talking about for the pH level. When you're testing the soil, and we normally use strips. It's a strip test. Where you mix the soil in water, and based on the color of the strip, it will tell you your pH is too acid or too soil is too acid or too alkaline. Ideally, you're looking for a pH around 6.5 up to 7.5, ideally, which is right. So when it's too low, that is when it becomes an acid soil or acidic soil.
All right, here's another question. Can you stop using fertilizer after you start, or do you have to continue using fertilizer until you harvest the crop?
My question, you could stop at any time.
Okay.
Basically, you have to watch the crop and see if it is lacking fertilizer. Because if your soil is good, you don't need to fertilize.
Right.
Yeah, so basically you're looking at your crop, and once you see that vegetative growth, which means it's growing properly, you don't have to give it nitrogen. In the case of like tomatoes, once it's producing blossoms, you don't have to give it any other phosphorus. So you watch your crop, and then based on that, you can fertilize.
Okay. All right. Someone missed the point about root crops in relation to lack of phosphorus. So is there any quick tip that you can give us on that, root crops and phosphorus?
The yams, the sweet potatoes, the cassava, which is the root crop. So when you're purchasing your fertilizer, a lot of people will purchase 12-17-2, which is the most common fertilizer in Barbados, right? But remember, it's a root crop, so you need root development, which is high in phosphorus.
Okay.
Yeah, so you need a fertilizer that is high in phosphorus that will enhance the tubers to develop.
Okay. That's where we would have to look at the numbers.
That's where we have to look at the numbers.
Okay. Yes. Yeah. Marquita wants to know, what is happening if your pepper seedling is going slow and short? It's growing slow and short.
A lack of nitrogen.
Lack of nitrogen.
Lack of nitrogen.
Okay. Okay.
So a 20-20-20 fertilizer may help her at that stage.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. And I think you did this one. The root hormone is placed in the soil before you plant the seedlings.
That's correct. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Right. All right. So if there are any more questions, just get them coming quickly. All right. One more. Can you repeat or what else to add besides the 20-20-20 for your seedlings for root development? I think you just mentioned that. Yeah.
Yeah. So you some company will sell what we call a rooting formula or rooting compound. So you can mix that in your mix, whatever you choose to mix it with, potting mix or whatever, you can mix that in before you plant your seeds. And then after you see that true leaf develop, 3 or 4 true leaves, then you could put your 20-20-20, and you could place it every 7 days. This is a foliar feed. And it gives your seedlings a bright green color. And generally what I would recommend is what I consider above shoot and below shoot. You want your stems to be about 2/3 the length of your roots. So you're looking for good roots, but also you want your plant to look young, hardy, and strong so that they can survive.
Okay, great. All right, here's another one. Is there anything you can do with the soil in preparation for planting?
Yes, plenty. First of all, when you're plowing, before manually or by machinery, you could add that organic manure, the sheep down, rabbit down, fowl down once it's well rotted, and you could add that in the plowing stage. Okay. Then after you plow and you're ready to sow, then you can even put your rooting powder based on what crop you're going to plant. The rooting powder can be placed in the soil at that time. Okay. Normally, for seedling production, at the time of transplanting your seedling, you can apply fertilizer at transplanted stage because it gives the plant a boost. And at the stage where you see the blossom starting to appear, you could also apply another set of fertilizer. So you're there as a prevention rather than waiting till something happens.
Okay, great. Right, and Jennifer wants to verify, am I right that you said use foliar feed for seedlings?
That's correct.
Yes, thank you.
Because it's difficult to use the granulate to put grains of 12-12 sprinkling in your seedling production. So once you mix the foliar feed correctly, you can apply it on your crop.
Okay. Yes. Okay, when crops are labeled as organic, does it mean that they may have had organic fertilizer added to them? So when crops are labeled as organic, does it mean that they have had organic fertilizer added to them?
I'm smiling. This is a big topic. I'm not sure when people label things organic, what do they really mean? Let me explain what organic is supposed to be. Right? Organic means you're growing your produce without the interference of chemicals. You're growing it naturally. So your fertilizer has to be natural. But let me start. Your seeds have to be natural. It can't be any hybrid seeds with any other hormone in it. Your fertilizer has to be natural. Your water also has to be natural. You can't be using water from BWA and call it organic because it has chlorine.
Wow.
So that's why I say I smile. So I tread cautiously. So everything's supposed to be organic. So therefore, people that have streams, you can use stream water because it's natural and water your plants, or you can catch rainwater and water your plants. But the thing organic is stepping very lightly. So the whole process is organic. Stacey, you have anything to add?
I'm smiling broadly when at that question as well, because I know that there are some persons that will label their crops as organic and they will not be observing organic and best practices. I actually know of a situation where there was a farmer growing crops and they were being grown under the same conditions, but one was being labeled as organic and the other one was the regular crop. And generally why persons do that, and I must caution you here because persons use organic very loosely, the term organic, and why they tend to do it is because organic crops tend to fetch a higher price. So if one of the main reasons why persons do it is actually a marketing strategy. So they will label their crops as organic because they generally can price them a little higher. So you have to be careful when you're purchasing things. I'm not saying that every company or every farmer does this, but we are aware of cases where persons will label crops as organic because they can price them a little higher. So for price differentiation, sometimes persons do that as well.
Okay, let me ask, is there, for the trained eye or the experienced person, can you tell the difference? Can you differentiate?
Not with the eye.
Okay.
Actually, organic farmers have to be certified, right? So we come and we test the water, we test the soil, for example, because the soil, let's say last week you had soil there using fertilizer, using chemicals. Next week, you can't call that soil organic soil. There's a process of time where that soil over 7 years is depleted from any kind of thing. So you test the soil, you test the water. And the third thing, which is very important, your neighbors. You want to do organic farming, but your neighbors are spraying every day. And because of the rain drift, it will come on your property.
So that's not organic.
Yeah, so it's a process and not just a change of a name.
Okay. All right. What does
I must say, Judy, that there is an organic farmers association here, and these are persons that generally practice and they slavishly practice organic farming. So if you're interested, you can reach out to that particular organization, because there are farmers here that do practice organic farming. They stay away from pesticides. If they're going to be fertilizing their crops, as Alvin would have said, they ensure that they're going to be using organic fertilizers, so manure and such like. They ensure that that manure stays and it is broken down. They don't use water from the BWA because obviously it's chemically treated. So if you're going to be using water from the BWA, you cannot or you should not label your crops as organically grown.
Okay, we have another question. What does Epsom salts provide? I know some people give that to the lime trees or so.
Yes, it's one of the micronutrients that is needed for the plants. One of the reasons is calcium or magnesium, right? Because our soils are not acid, magnesium is released when the soils become acid. So our soils are neutral, so therefore they won't release the magnesium and sometimes even zinc.
Okay.
Right, so that's important. So you can give, not every week, but probably every crop life, you could give a teaspoon of salt, and that will help the crop as well.
Okay. All right. Someone has fertilizer labeled 12-12-17-2. What does that mean?
Okay. Therefore, 12 nitrogen, 12 phosphorus, 17 potassium, and the 2 is actually zinc.
Zinc. Okay. Yeah, right. That's the fourth one. Okay.
Yeah. What I would also mention there are two types of the 12-12-17-2. There's a blue one, and then there's a normal color. The blue fertilizer is what we call a slow release. Stacey speaking about most fertilizer released quickly in the soil. They've developed a blue fertilizer that is released very slowly in the soil. So the 12-12-17-2 blue is a slow releasing fertilizer.
Okay. All right. And someone wants you to, can you repeat what is foliar feed?
Okay. Foliar feed is just fertilizing by spraying onto the leaf. Normal fertilizer absorbs through the roots. Okay. But when you spray on with the leaf, it absorbs through the leaf.
Right. Okay. Got you. Okay. Yeah. All right. Okay. I think we have covered question. Okay. Okay. Where is it that we can get the organic vegetables? Can you tell us?
When the person says vegetables, they mean crops or?
Well, crops. I suppose that's where Stacey was telling us, you know, that there's someone that, there's a group, an organization that, you know, practice the organic farming holistically. So we want to find out where we can get those.
I don't have a contact number, but I know they operate out of St. Andrew.
And you don't know the name?
I will have to get that information.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll get that information. We'll get that from you. You get it and pass it on to us. Yeah. Sure. All right. So it seems like those are all the questions for this evening. So we thank you once again for doing a great job, Stacey and Alvin. And I'm sure that we have learned quite a bit, and we will certainly, anything that we miss, we'll go back and review, watch this video, and we will certainly learn and grow. I hope, well, I'm not sure if we did get any comments regarding tips that persons would have used, but we do encourage you that don't just, you know, learn for this evening, hear the information, but use it. And not only for your benefit, but as your crops grow and bloom, you share with your neighbors. Also share the tips so that they too can pass it on to the others in the community, and we all will live healthier lives. So thank you again to our presenters. Thank you, our audience, for coming and sharing this time with us. And we are sure that you would have grown with us as well. And as usual, we leave you with one quote. And this evening, this one is by Barbara Johnson, who says that growing is a lifetime job, and we grow most when we are down in the valleys where the fertilizer is. So I encourage you to grow. Put your roots down and grow. Have a great weekend, everyone. God bless.